Thank you very much, David. It's always embarrassing to come on after such wonderful world-class Kiwis. And we have some stunning world-class Kiwis amongst our midst. And I know out there in the audience that it is my sincere hope that your turn is coming, because our country needs that. We need to take advantage of our small size. For 150 years now, we have said we're on the bottom end of the world, we're miles from the markets, we're only 3 or 4 million people, woe is us. But we've got to start looking at it the other way. We have so many natural advantages that it's not funny. In fact, I almost think it's unfair on the rest of the world, as long as we look at it from a different way. And one of the things that we can do is to share the secrets of our success. And that's what I want to do with you this morning, because we need it. 80% of our exports come from 188 companies. NZTE knows the names and addresses of 188 people who fundamentally pay this nation's bills. And that's not enough. So as Sean pointed out, we need more of you in the audience to step up and do that. But as we step up and do that, we've got to make sure we don't make the same mistakes as everyone else has made. That's not taking advantage of our size. We should not reinvent the wheel, as us Kiwis are often prone to do. So we've got to learn from those that have gone before us. So today I want to share a lot of those lessons, and that comes from one of the hats I wear, which is chair of the Beachheads program. And like many things that are brilliant, it's elegantly simple. The Beachheads program, NZTE has gone and rounded up some very powerful and influential Kiwis. We're the second highest nation on the planet with offshore human assets, 4 million onshore, 1 million offshore. So the only country that has more people offshore than New Zealand is Ireland. And they've been exporting people since the potato famine, so they had a few more years at it. And a lot of those 1 million Kiwis have gone to amazing places. And you've seen some of them here today, and there are many more like that out there. And we have to remember that business is all about people. It's all about relationships. And when these Kiwi companies go overseas and try and get into the corridors of power, they often can't, unless they're sponsored in. And that's what these Kiwi advisors do in these markets. They sponsor the Kiwi companies into the corridors of power to accelerate their growth. But here's the rub. A lot of those companies that go to jump the ditch land on their nose. Jump the ditch, land on their nose. Jump the ditch, land on their nose. And someone finally said, hey, why don't we teach them to jump the ditch and land on their feet? That's a good idea. So that's what a lot of the New Zealand advisors do. And it's interesting, out of 150 odd companies we see come through the Beachheads program, they all tend to make the same top 6 mistakes. And we're just too small to let that happen to all our companies. So I'm going to share with you this morning quickly those top 6 mistakes. Now it doesn't matter whether your company is export oriented or not, most of those lessons apply to a domestic company just as much as it does to a company that's going overseas. And the first of those mistakes is governance. And for me, this is the most important one, because if you get this one right, a good board will fix the other 5. And I see 3 types of governance out there. I see poor governance, and there's a lot of that. I see no governance, which is actually better than poor governance. And then I see good governance. And a simple definition for me of poor governance is what I call supplier governance or shareholder governance. You know, your suppliers to your company are your board, you know, your accountant or your lawyer. Or your shareholders are your board, and you're having a shareholder meeting, but for some reason ego gets in the way, and you actually call it a directors meeting, which is something it's not. So my metaphor for governance is that when you're running your company, you've got to go flat out. It's like driving a car through the desert, flat out at night, and you know there's potholes up ahead, and you've got these feeble little headlights out there in front, and you know you're going to absolutely go as fast as you can, because if you ease up on the accelerator, the opposition's going to pass you by on the left or your right. So there you are, and it's a pretty scary place to be. Having a good board is like having a set of floodlights on the roof of the cab that illuminate the holes up ahead in time for you to steer around them, and you don't have to drive into them. It's not about having somebody inside the cab reading the same dials that you're reading. It's not about having someone inside the cab fighting you for control of the steering wheel. And it's not about somebody inside the cab telling you how to drive the vehicle. It's about illuminating the future, and a lot of boards don't spend enough time doing that. And it's remarkable. So there's another thing that was why you need a good board, because for most businesses, it's not about being plus or minus 10% on any project or any initiative that you do. What kills companies is an Exocet missile that comes in from left field that you didn't see coming. And that comes from a lack of a 360-degree view. Best definition of maturity I ever heard was when I spent some time in Canada and my wonderful Uncle Doug, and he said, you know, the ability to look at a problem from 360 degrees is a definition of maturity. And we all know that, if we have children and you've got a son and it's just, they come at it from their quadrant, just from their small sector. If you're dishing out the ice cream to your young lad, it's all about me, 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 whether I'll get more or less than my brother or sister either side of them. And we all know that growing up is compulsory, but growing wise is optional. And I still meet a lot of people today who come from this angle of me, me, me. And it happens there. And what you need around your board is that 360-degree view that will tell you whether you're going to have an exocet missile coming from left field or not. And a lot of boards don't have that shape. What you know is about 15 degrees of the pie. What you don't know is probably about another 15 degrees. But the rest of that circle is what you don't know that you don't know. And have the courage to admit that. New Zealand, I think, makes great managers, but not so many leaders. Simple definition for me is managers think they have to know the answer. Leaders have the courage to know that answers lie outside of themselves and are prepared to get those skills to help them drive their company into the future. We see the same with strategy. I do a lot of work around strategy for the Institute of Directors. And I find it amazing that a lot of people, when they go and do a strategy session, will take a board, if they have one, their senior exec team, and they'll go off-site and get a facilitator in and have a strategy day. And I don't know where the logic is that you take the same minds into a different room and think you're going to get different thinking. I just find that extraordinary. Most strategy suffers from a narrowness of thinking that goes into it. So where in that room is an ex-competitor who knows your wrinkles, when he's selling against you? We're in the room as a customer. We're in the room as an ex-customer who left you for various reasons, and you need to understand why. We're in the room as tomorrow's customer base, youth. We're in the room as the diversity. 50% of our population are female. We're in the room as somebody who knows nothing about your industry and has the courage to ask the dumb questions. And without that diversity of thought going into strategy, that narrowness of thought is going to give you a narrowness of output. It's just the reality. That's the same with a board and often the senior exec team. It's not a judgment, it's just a reality. The climber is too close to the cliff to see it. And if you put more climbers in a room, you haven't got anybody who's got a perspective from miles back there who's saying, are you even on the right mountain? And you need that perspective, otherwise you're going to end up in trouble. And we can't let New Zealand companies do that. True story. A printing company that I met, this was a few years ago, and we're talking about the UFB, the internet, and how it's going to change the world. It allows us to go out to 7 billion people, but it also allows 7 billion people to come to us. And he said, I don't need the internet. And I says, what do you mean? He says, I've got a printing company. Every morning I go out the back and I've got these 10-ton printing presses, solid as a rock. He says, I don't even have to know anything about the internet because I do all the business from the companies up and down my street. And they know me, I know them. It was my father's business, my grandfather's business. He says, I haven't even got the internet connected. So I told him a story, which was a true story, and about a friend of mine who set up a business in Sydney. And he wanted some new business cards printed. Not a big run of business cards, about 1,000 cards. Lots of colour, lots of design, double-sided, wanted to use the real estate on the back, all that sort of stuff. Wanted it designed, printed, and delivered to his door. So we went up and down his street, asking the local print companies. And he got some prices on a small run, a lot of design effort. And it was about, a few years ago, it was about $750, $720, $700, roughly the prices in New Zealand at the time. And then he went to a website called guru.com, and if you don't know about it, you should, but 30,000 professionals surf that website every day to do fixed price work. And so we put it out there. I want some business cards done. So we accepted 3 quotes. One was for $26, one was for $27, and one was for $28. And he liked the $27 quote because that was designed by a PhD in design student in Uzbekistan. It was printed in China, and it was delivered to his door in Sydney for $27. And he won the Australian Business Card of the Year award. So I said to this printer, there's a fair chance the only reason you're in business because your customers up and down your street don't know this website exists. That's a pretty scary place to be. And yet with a good board, that company would thrive. If I was on the board of that company, we would take advantage of that and we wouldn't be dying because of that. And New Zealand should not lose those companies. We can't afford to lose those companies. So if I can give you one message today, I urge you to be leaders and know that the answers lie outside of yourselves and get some independent thinking around your board. And don't just go out and hire the first name that you think about. There is a process to that, and if you want to know the process, ask. IOD has some wonderful things about first boards on their website, and there's lots of other places to ask as well. The second mistake that us Kiwis tend to make a lot is we are very product focused. You've heard it a lot today, as opposed to market focused. You know, we see the world through the windscreen of our own vehicle. We don't see the world through the customer's eyes, through the customer's experience, through the market perspective. We're so busy just looking out through our own vehicle. We become really good at designing our own product or service, but we're very poor at designing our company that actually knows what's happening out in that market and what customer problem we're trying to solve. Do we even know how our customers make money or how our customers' customers make money? And so we become very much a product push or a service push type entity. And we really don't understand those market forces. So it's a recurring theme you've heard from some of the speakers here today, and it wasn't pre-planned, but that customer perspective is absolutely critical because the customer experience is key. Harvard Business Review came out the other day. We measure all sorts of things in our companies. They said there's only one number you need to know whether you thrive, whether you're growing or you're dying, whether you're going from yesterday's rooster to tomorrow's feather duster, because it happens that fast. And people measure all sorts of things in their business, but that one number is, will your customers refer your product or service to their friends? And if you think about it, if the market loves what you do, you're growing. And if they hate what you do, you're not. And most companies don't even measure that, which I find extraordinary. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the go-to-market model. And it's quite extraordinary how in New Zealand we don't understand. Well, it's quite natural. We have a direct go-to-market model. When you live in a village, everybody sells direct. I mean, you'd be silly not to, right? If there's only 3 people in town to sell to, you just go up and sell to them. But when you go overseas in these mature markets, you don't have enough time to make those relationships, and it costs a lot of money to form those relationships. So what do? Say, okay, I'll get a partner. I'll get an indirect model, a channel partner, or a distributor, or some format of that. And then a lot of what Kiwis companies do is they go to market, they interview a whole lot of distributors, they talk to 1, 2, 3, they resonate with one on a chemistry level, personality level, they've got a buzz about their product or service, they sign them up, go back to New Zealand and wait for the orders to flow. Now they've already made 3 key mistakes, right? You should actually go into these markets and ask your customer who they would buy your product or service from. The intermediate guys are always going to tell you that they own this market space, and very few of them really do. And who do they own it with? And also, when you have an indirect channel, you have to work that channel. You can't just sit back and wait for the orders to flow. You've got to go on the sales calls with them, you've got to overcome the objections, you've got to get down to the negotiation, you've got to close the deal, you've got to do the post-sales, you've got to prime the pump 1 or 2 times before the engine will kickstart into life and do it for you. And a lot of Kiwis, after they've done this once or twice, thinking, hey, I'm doing all the work, and I'm giving away half the margin, bugger this, I'm going to set up some direct. And then we say, okay, how are you going to hire the right people? Hire the person who's going to turn it around for you. And they say, I'm just going to hire the prince, the king. And you go, well, you can't afford the king. The king's making 10 times more with the opposition company in market who are 10 times bigger than you. So you can't afford the king. Okay, I like the DNA, so I'm going to go out and hire the prince. And he'll be cheaper, but he'll be the king to be. But most times, because we don't know it, we end up hiring the court jester. Because low-hanging fruit is low-hanging fruit for a reason. It happens with customers, and it happens with people. And so they try and make this work for a while, and they struggle, and in the end, after 6 or 7 years in market, they've made very little progress, burned lots of cash, and haven't got the cut-through that they want. And again, you don't have to make those mistakes. If you're going to have an indirect channel, have one. They work really well, but find people who know about them, because it's not part of our natural DNA here in New Zealand. That was number 3. Number 4 is a toe in the water. So I find a lot of people who think, I'm struggling to get the cash in New Zealand to work, but I've got a bit of a market share. If I could get the same market share in a bigger market, I'll be rolling in cash. So if you go overseas because the New Zealand company's struggling a little bit, that is often a disaster. You can make a lot of money in a foreign market, but you've got to do it properly. You can't just put a toe in the water, dip in and out, and think it's going to solve some problems back home. Usually it results in terminal death for the patient back home, and that's just a shame. So do it properly, fund it properly, make your approach into that market properly, and there's a lot of help around the world to do that as well. So don't do the toe in the water. The next one is getting the right people. So I know a lot of people say, hire the right people. There's a reason your company's successful in New Zealand. There's an X factor to it. Business is about people. Often it's the founder, the owner, some of your senior people, it's your culture, it's whatever it is. There's an X factor. And you can't grow your company in another market by fly fishing remotely, just flying in and out 2 or 3 times a year. It just doesn't work. You've got to transplant somebody who understands that X factor in market, and they've got to be able to grow it and make it happen. Often it's the founder. You saw Catherine speak this morning. She did that. She went over there and did that transplant and got it working. And you've got to do it so that when you transplant that person into that market, it doesn't kill the patient back home as well. And it's really difficult to do because there will be some pain back home, and you've got to prepare for that and you've got to get ready for that. But if you don't put a senior person in market, you're not going to form relationships. You think you are, but you're not. As you heard Sean speak, you know, it's having meals with them at night and having a beer with them after work and seeing them regularly. They're not going to make you a supplier to their company if they don't know that you're there permanently and you're not around and you're not committed to that geography. So it just won't happen. And number 6, ripping through them quite quickly, is strategy. Now in New Zealand, a lot of companies have what I call a lantern-like strategy. To make ends meet, we actually turn our hand to the left and to the right of our main strategy and turn a dollar, because sometimes we just have to. And that's how we make ends meet, and that's how we make things go. But that broad strategy will never cut it in an overseas market. We often go into those markets with what I call the blunt axe, and it's just not sharp enough to get the cut through in these more sophisticated or mature markets. So you've got to have a laser-like strategy, literally a laser-like strategy. And you've got to understand really what your company is good at. What's its true, unique, competitive advantage on a global scale, not just a local scale. And ask yourself, is all my capital behind that bit which I am best at, that bit which nobody else can do or very few others can match what I do? And for a lot of reasons, it's not. You know, as we grow up, we're just people and we gather a lot of baggage. We hire more people and we have cars and we have stuff. And a lot of our capital gets used on things that aren't core to the company. It's just a reality. If you want to run like a cheetah, you can't have the baggage of an elephant. And it is about speed over there as well. You know, the numbers for companies going from 0 to $1 billion in revenue keep breaking all the time. Not market cap, but revenue. It used to be 9 years from 0 to $1 billion in revenue. Then it was 8, 7, 6, now it's 2.4 years to $1 billion in revenue. So we think we go on a long hike in New Zealand in our companies, but everyone else is sprinting. We've got to learn to sprint too. And a last story to tell the message, I suppose, about where you put your capital behind your sharp point of your business is years ago I was working for Accenture in Melbourne, and we got a speaker out from the US and we took him out to Perth. And at Perth at that time, there were a lot of farmers and a lot of drought after drought after drought. And the farmers were bleating to Canberra, drought relief. Woe is us. The wind's blowing the topsoil away. We can't survive. And so this chap spoke about outsourcing and getting focused on your business. And he said, you're the masters of your own destiny. And they said, what do you mean? He said, okay, there was about 90 people in the room. Hand up all those farmers who own their own land. All been farmers, they all put their hand up. Hand up all those people in the room who own their own tractors. All been farmers, they all put their hand up. Hands up all those people in the room who own their own harvesting equipment, and all been farmers, they all put their hand up. And he says, there you go. You've forgotten what it is to be a farmer. It's not a collection of stuff. It's the IP in your head to grow crops in really arid conditions. And all your capital is not behind that. And he said, what do you mean? He says, okay, well, I'll show you how if you want to. So about a third of the room went with him, and he says, sell your land, which was this much, and lease 5 times as much, and plant it. Sell your tractor and get it in 12 times a year when you need it. Sell your harvesting equipment and rent it in twice a year when you need it. And those farmers that did that were going to economic prosperity within 3 to 4 years. And those that still owned all that stuff were not. So the challenge for you and your businesses is, where is your capital? Is it behind the pointy end of your company? Or do you collect stuff because ego and society and everybody thinks you should? What is your unique competitive advantage? And is your entire business focused on getting behind that unique competitive advantage? So the last thing I want to leave you with is a lot of companies do, and you've heard it here today, what I call walking into the future, facing backwards. What I did yesterday was successful, so more of that will make me successful tomorrow. Challenge that, because I've found it's not often true, and it's a trap. It is what I call the living dead. More of what I did yesterday will work tomorrow. More of what I did yesterday in New Zealand will work overseas. Really challenge that. It's not often the case. When I lived in Canada, ice hockey is a game that you love, and there was always one player who was head and shoulders above all the other players. hugely competitive, highly professional game, and that was Wayne Gretzky. And they always asked him, why are you so good? He was the Richie McCaw of ice hockey. For 10 years, he was head and shoulders above everybody else. And he always had the same answer. He says, because I skate to where the puck is going to be. And that's what our New Zealand businesses need to do. That's what I challenge your business to think about. Think about the future. Think about where the puck is going to be and design your business, not just your product or service, to get there. Thank you.